We've got a very packed day today, a busy agenda. So we're going to try and be as efficient as possible. So please excuse our tardiness for starting. But obviously, every block I'm have just 10 minutes, so we're a little bit kind of within the realms of the start time. But Rick Messit is going to be our first speaker today. Come on, Rick. Nice. Take over my mic and let's get the show running.
Oh, two big things in my hand. You're just right. Right. Okay. So, hi. First, my name is Rick. I've been using Bitcoin for close to 12 years now. So, that's since before Ethereum was launched, before my box got hacked, before El Salvador got involved, and now treasury companies and strategic reserves and all this carry on. And as you might expect, it's been a really wild ride. Seen all sorts. I've seen exchanges getting hacked, lending platforms blowing up. I've seen bear markets, bull markets, government bans, and everything in between. And what I've also seen at that time is a lot of people get themselves into a little bit of trouble and losing their money, right? I've had a few speed bumps myself on the way as well. So I thought, well, how can I take this 12 years of experience and try and condense it down into some actionable advice that if you're at the start of your journey, you could use to have a smoother and safer experience in Bitcoin. So, welcome to Rick Guide. Do not get Let's face it, if you won't get on myself included. Right, so let's start with the question. Who knows a way to get rich? Oh, you like this. Well, don't worry. That most of us did, right? And who could blame you? Because look at Bitcoin's performance over the last 16 years. Even if you didn't show up right at the start, let's say you bought 10 Bitcoin in 2014 for $8,000. Well, today, you'd be able to sell that for north of 1 million. What an amazing investment, right? Bitcoin really looks like a great way to speculate and grow your wealth. But I admit to you that if you think you're investing in Bitcoin, that will mean you don't fully understand it just yet. Because Bitcoin is not a speculative investment. Let me try this way. So Cambridge Dictionary's definition of speculation is that it's to buy and sell in the hope that the value of what you buy will increase, and then you can sell it later at a high price for it. Okay, so does Bitcoin fit the bill? Well, it definitely increases the value, right? Because we take that off. But what about selling it at a higher price for a profit? That's why I think it's a little bit interesting, right? Because it begs the question, well, sell your Bitcoin to say profit in what exactly? Fiat currency? Okay, but a big part of the reason Bitcoin has gained so much value relative to fiat is simply because it's too nearly a form of money. It's finite. It has a predictable inflation rate, which is something that might appeal to great trees. It's commissionable. It's borderless. It's censorship resistant. And best of all, central banks can't make more of it than the nation say. So, if you stop and think about it, speculating on Bitcoin to try and get more dollars, does that really make a lot of sense? That means you're investing in a superior form of money to try and get more of the inferior sort of form of money that is set to replace. It's kind of like investing in laptops to try and get a typewriter, right? Because Bitcoin is not an investment, it's not treated as that, and it's not a commodity. It is simply better money. You don't invest in Bitcoin, you just upgrade it. So why do people view Bitcoin as a investment? Well, the answer is quite simple. So if they use fiat to value all the things around it all the time. But there's a risk to using fiat currency in dollars to denominate, because it leads to faulty thinking. I would bet to you that if you have upgraded your money to Bitcoin, then you should start using it to denominate the way that you price everything. So, you shop baby cars and houses, should all be priced in Bitcoin. You might be sitting there thinking, well, Rick, isn't this all a bit trivial, right? Because I mean, let's face it, we could jump from Bitcoin, dollars, pounds, back to Bitcoin. So, why is this so important? Why is this mindset shift useful? Well, the best way to explain that is with a word example. So, let's imagine in 2019 there are two investors who are both terrified of having inflation, and they both have $100,000 to invest. Let's call them Peter and his That's all you know. Right, okay. So Peter has always been a gold bug. He takes his 100 grand and he decides to buy 80 ounces of gold at a price of $1,250. Spencer, on the other hand, has been listening to some conspiracy theorists on the internet, and he's decided he's going to spend his 100K on 20 Bitcoin at a price of $5,000. Right, so they were both right. Inflation wasn't transitory, right? And it was a bit higher. So actually, gold and Bitcoin both appreciated versus the dollar. By 2024, 1 ounce of gold at 2,400, and Bitcoin's 65,000. Right? So let's look at how they perform. But straight away, it's really easy to see that Spencer's performance has massively outperformed Peter's. But because we're measuring in dollars, still looks like he did okay. He's made $92,000. He's made a 92% return. Right? So you can say he's made a handsome profit. But look what happens when we start using Bitcoin as our denominator instead. In 2019, 1 ounce of gold will be 0.25 Bitcoin. But by 2024's 1 ounce of gold will only be 0.0369 Bitcoin. So, when Peter first bought his 80 ounces of gold, it was worth 20 Bitcoin. But by 2024, it's worth less than 3. So if we're using Bitcoin as our denominator, our measure of value, then Peter made an 85% loss, which makes him really unhappy. Spencer, on the other hand, because he uses Bitcoin as a denominator, well, the price of 1 Bitcoin in 2019 is 1 Bitcoin. That's 2024, 1 Bitcoin costs 1 Bitcoin. And that means he starts with 20 Bitcoin, ended with 20 Bitcoin, and the returns are flat, and there's no return. And that's because he didn't invest in Bitcoin, he upgraded to Bitcoin. And it's worth pointing out at this point as well that if he wanted to, Spencer can now buy all 80 ounces of Peter's gold and still have 17 Bitcoin left over. Because Spencer, he's an absolute cat. Okay. The point here is, guys, that Bitcoin is money. Everything else is credit. You don't take profit by selling Bitcoin, you take profit in Bitcoin. And if you speculate in anything and it loses value against Bitcoin, then the simple truth is you've lost money. So, stay humble, stacks doesn't mean stay humble and increase your investment exposure to Bitcoin. It just means stay humble and save money. Okay, so another way that you might get back that we should avoid, right, is counterparty risk. So, what is counterparty risk? Well, in simple terms, it's like lending your friend £100 that he never was able to pay you back because he had invested in XR. Now, how much your money even has a bad luck, but because you trusted a counterparty to act responsibly and they're defaulting on that obligation. Now, there are some needs to this problem, but they might not be for everything, right? But let's look at traditional finance. In traditional finance, counterparty risk operates in basically the same way, just much larger than normal players. Because financial institutions today are so interconnected to each other, they have thousands of counterparties. And that's why we hear financial analysts talk about things like scenarios. The fear being that before the financial institution goes down, it's going to take a load of flip. I'm sure you can all remember 2008. So, the thing with counterparty risk is most people are like completely blind to it, it's just not even on their radar. And a big part of the reason for that is that fiat system is made us complacent and it's made us docile. Because it has things like this. Your bank deposits guarantee up to a rate of £85,000 per account volume per person, right? And what that means is if the bank goes top, you don't suffer any of the consequences when counterparty risk goes on, right? And what that means is that like preyouts that have never seen a predator, if we just don't recognise this, we don't take on board. And because of these government safety facts, things are actually maybe even worse than this, because it's shown us into a society of spoiled children who take no responsibility for our actions. When the fact goes on, we never look inwards and say, well, how responsible am I for giving my money to this bunch of criminals? Instead, all we expect is a government to step in, socialise as fosters, and make the rest of society pay for these mistakes. Well, I want to tell you, you cannot afford to be this complacent in Bitcoin. Because nobody can put more of it. Nobody can help you out. And in Bitcoin, there's no such thing as an institution that's too big to fail. And we have seen this time and time again throughout Bitcoin. I think that so many changes in custodians have and listen, I'm a big bet that anyone through that trend is not going to end anytime soon. So, you can be your own way. Because the first thing about all of this is that Bitcoin is meant to be electronic cash. It was explicitly designed for you to be able to use it without the need of trusted third parties. It was designed for you to be your own bank and reduce your counterparty risk to absolute zero. You don't need to suffer counterparty risk. Because the safest way to secure your Bitcoin is not leaving it in the hands of anybody else. It's by putting it in your own wallet. That's it. Full yourself. That's it. Right, and let's talk about another risk, leverage. Right? Leverage can kill you if you're not careful. I'm going to speak about a specific type of leverage that people are getting involved with at the moment. So, we also love Bitcoin, right? Because you learn, if you hold on to it for long enough, your purchasing power just goes through the roof. And it's lovely. The thing is, you've kind of learned during this process, delayed gratification and hunger is what got me here. But man, you look at that increased purchasing power, right? It'd be nice to dip into a little benefit because you don't want to end up in a situation like this. But you just don't want to give up on the hodl. If only there was a way where you can hodl your Bitcoin and still somehow spend it. Well, fear not, folks, because they're trying to find loads every time, right? And they've come up with a really interesting way for you to try and have your cake baked too. Because they offer you Bitcoin back the loads. Because think about it, why sell your Bitcoin when you can just use it as collateral? It's like, I mean, think about it, guys. It's genius, isn't it? Right? You're going to buy Bitcoin and use it as collateral for a loan. And there's Bitcoin value. No, and Bitcoin value shows up. The loan can become over-collateralized to the point where it's trivial to pay off. Right? How could you possibly lose? Well, there's a couple of ways you can lose, so let's look at it. First of all, the obvious one is counterparty risk. The only way you're getting Bitcoin is by giving it to someone else to look after. And in Bitcoin, we have a saying, it's not your keys, not your coin. With this risk, you can say, let someone else hold on to it for you. But also, this Bitcoin's volatility, which is quite famous, right? Yes, the prices like this go up. So this is what Walmart did in 2017 looked like. The price of brick tire. Look at these savage 38% bits along the way. So, you might take a Bitcoin back low, and it's typically require a loan to value ratio of 60%. Which in simple terms means if you want to borrow 60 grand, you're going to have to post 100 grams worth of Bitcoin as collateral. Now, if the price keeps going up, you're all going to issue loans to value ratio is going to go down. Happy days. However, imagine you're an unfortunate soul and you have one of these numbers just before these 38% dips. Well, as the price shoots downward, your LTV ratio is going to shoot up. And if the dip's big enough, you might quickly reach 100%. Now you've got a problem because your loan is under collateralized. What comes next is your loan provider is going to ring you up and say, you need to give us more Bitcoin. You need to shore up this loan with more collateral. If you don't have that money, you don't have that Bitcoin available, well, you're out of luck and you've lost your Bitcoin. So you can't think out those BSCs and leverage. Now, some people I know always said that, and the smart money don't sell their assets. They've already expert. This is what rich people do. It's smart, right? And the worst ones will all say, I'm so smart. I'm going to take this Bitcoin loan. And with the money that I've borrowed, I'm going to have even more Bitcoin. So we're stacks even bigger. And then as inflation rates and the value of dollars goes to nothing, my loan will be easy to pay off. I'll have even more Bitcoin. I'll get fabulously wealthy. They tell me things like, great. Basically, my saver today, and I'm doing a speculative attack on the dollar. Well, I'm sorry to tell you that no, you are not just like my saver. Because I thought that's not supposed to be Bitcoin. That's possible to raise his debt. That's it. Ecosystem being shared in this company. And I thought ours at a rate of 1% or lower, whereas your average Bitcoin back loan is 12%. So big difference here, guys. And here's the funniest thing to me is, are you really telling that you can't access cheaper credit? Come on, you can get 0% credit cards, you can remortgage your house at a far less rate. And if your finances are off these, you can put your personal loan at 7%. So it's slightly beyond it. Why you take your Bitcoin, taking the same risk amount someone else holding, just so that you can access a really poorly priced loan. I would suggest that you're not performing the settlers at half of a dollar. You might be performing settlers at half yourself. Okay, the next one. Let's talk about paper Bitcoin. You might have heard about this recently. Essentially, what this is instead of just accumulating UTXOs, people are out there buying paper IOUs instead. They're busy trying to get exposure to Bitcoin rather than taking the simple route, which is just buying some and keeping it in their own wallet. There's a few ways we can do this. Yeah, even Bitcoin and Virgins, meaning you might hold in paper Bitcoin. Because when you log into your exchange account and you look at balance, you have to understand these are just numbers on the screen. That's just a graphic user interface that make you say whatever they want. It doesn't necessarily mean that the exchange has the Bitcoin to land it up. So you want to ask yourself questions like this. Do you think that every single exchange user tomorrow morning trying to withdraw their Bitcoin off all the exchanges at the same time, they will be able to do it? Or do you think there could be a chance that some of them might be engaged in some fractional reserve banking and actually selling more Bitcoins to their users than they actually have? I already asked that question, but I know how to sitting around to find out. You see it so many times before. Alright, let's talk about Bitcoin Easy Apps. Number 4 paper Bitcoin, where simply some people are going to be lovely architects of our current wonderful financial system to do business with them when they want to interact with it. They create it their own way. Let's explain. If you buy a Bitcoin ETF share, you don't own any Bitcoin yet. You just own paper promises. What's more, these paper promises are only redeemable if offers. So you still can't get access to Bitcoin. It's like what we talked about in one of the first slides. You're using Bitcoin to try and come over your pile of dollars. Kind of backwards thinking. And for all of this, you're actually going to pay a fee as well. Most of these venues are going to charge you 0.25% for every year people get checked. Now, it doesn't sound like a fault, right? Because one BTC's worth of value after 10 years, that's going to 0.975. But if Bitcoin is worth $10 million, this is just going to show you 250 grand. But if Asian would consider itself absolutely discreet, you can literally buy your Bitcoin while I won't cost you a penny. One of the best things about Bitcoin is there's no power cost. And one of our favorites, right? Paper Bitcoin by Bitcoin Treasury companies. I love Bitcoin, there is no second best at anyone else. Again, what's happening here is people are trying to get exposure to Bitcoin, right? And again, the truth is, you can buy as many stocks and as many treasury companies as you like. It gives you no play over the Bitcoin that's held within that treasury. And the thing I hear a lot from people buying these treasury companies is that I'm going to outperform Bitcoin. Oh, guys, in the last 12 years, I can tell you, I've heard that so many times. The guys who are buying shit coins told me they were outperforming. And you can buy ICOs, told me they were going to outperform Bitcoin. Then people buying NFTs told us they were going to outperform Bitcoin. And now, it's a Bitcoin treasury programs who are apparently going to outperform Bitcoin. But we should get to the point where understanding that Bitcoin is the denominator, the way we measure the value of everything, you realize on a long enough timeline, that's impossible. Everything will trend to zero versus Bitcoin. And the stock you bought isn't some magical exception to that. I'm not saying you might not have more Bitcoin in the short term, but when all is said and done, there's going to be bad words. And if you don't want that to be you, the best approach is to just do Bitcoin yourself. That's it. Because otherwise, if you're running around buying all this big Bitcoin news to you, you still don't hold any BTSOs. You don't have any Bitcoin. You said Bitcoin is money, and all it's empty. Okay, so we're still out. And here's the real bigger for me is that Bitcoin is always a risk for government. At some point in the next 5, 10, 15 years, stuff going to tour around the world. It's not here. Oh shit. We don't have enough of those Bitcoins. Right. Now, where is their attention going to be drawn? It's going to be drawn to these giant teapots like exchanges full of Bitcoin, treasury companies full of Bitcoin, ETFs full of Bitcoin. I don't know what they're going to do, but I know I don't trust the government as far as I can throw it. So I'm going to avoid all that chaos and just sit, saving money, staying humble, and all these Bitcoin stuff. And the final risk that I want to cover today is, do you know what? It's not really so much of a risk to Bitcoin as a risk to another really valuable currency that you have, which is your time. Because Bitcoin has reached a size and a popularity now that with that constant influx every year of new influencers who want to farm your attention, right? And the problem is that Bitcoin is more popular, has more influence out there producing a lot of content, and it doesn't give you that much value. So I'm going to try and point some out to you that like you guys when you see it. So you can see tweets like this a lot. Breaking news. Well, that's a good signal that you're not getting good quality content. Because 9 times out of 10, these are not good, right? And then you have to think about your podcasts that just go on an endless loop trying to help with each other and how intellectual these are. They say things like Bitcoin is secured by your brain, forces thermodynamics. Right? Truth in that, the more you split and say how big I might, the difficulty adjustment works. So, all that, right? Then listen, boys, you sit there one day tracking the ETF inflows, outflows, it's some mad, only company that they do every day. Trying to guess where prices go. Yeah, if you're tuning into this content, you're really growing your knowledge. That's all. This one's one of my favorites. Supply shop new colleague. Because they're trying to pump that FOMO, have your attention, right? I love this one. This is my personal favorite. This one, people come up and say things like, I'm calling for everyone to get to 1 Bitcoin. Guys, what the fuck does that mean? Right? Imagine you change that to dollars. I stood up here and I said, I am calling for everyone to get to $115,000. Cheers, great vibes. How is that useful at all? Okay, the one I've heard a couple of weeks ago, Bitcoin should be 24% full portfolio. Again, we should pull in line with our power hours here, because why not 25%? Why not 27%? If you really is, why not 100%? And then they'll tell you that they give it advice for free, they're just trying to help you on your journey, there's nothing in it for them, but I'm a professional marketer and I can tell you these guys are making a lot of money on Twitter revenue, YouTube revenue, and so they're getting you hooked on this fluffy nonsense content because they're making money, they're following your attention. And here's the truth, you don't need to get involved on any of the crazy stuff I would talk about today because it's so beautifully simple. It's simply money. Really good savings technology that you can use to slowly grow your wealth. Now, one big time in the 3 steps you want to take. Number 1, learn how to take self-custody and control your own bit. Which means you should learn how to use a hardware wallet, a Bitcoin node, and learn how to secure your seed things. Now, to the non-technical in the room, that might sound a bit scary, but I promise you can learn that in a weekend. And there's loads of people in this room who are very good at it. They've got time to sit down and walk you through it. Once you've done that, you're going to be in a position to stay humble and save money, and just slowly grow your Bitcoin balance. And then instead of listening to all that abuse of noise, just go out and enjoy your life. Lovely. Because the bottom line here, guys, is that only number that matters is your Bitcoin balance. In this world that we're traveling into, the sport path is going to be measured in UTXO. you cannot be sitting on 0 ETFs in this scenario. So, if you do this long enough, I guarantee you that you'll reach a point where you couldn't care less what this woman says, does, or thinks. So, my advice to you guys would be, keep it simple, upgrade your money, upgrade your
Messit for Mr. Now.